I always start Chatter That Matters with a personal story. Now, why does this topic or guest matter to me? Well, today I'm going to take you back to my childhood and our family kitchen. My mom had to go back to work to keep a roof over our heads. I think around age 12, I took over making the family dinner. Now, if you've listened to my podcast before, you know my mom is the greatest gift that ever happened to me. She still is, even though we lost her many, many years ago. She had so many talents, a work ethic, creativity, compassion, but she was a terrible cook. She could cook the juice out of a watermelon, so I didn't have a high bar to win over the family. We didn't have a lot of money, so fried bologna and pasta with cheese were part of our food budget. But with more money coming in, we could move from canned vegetables to fresh, chicken and beef for a stew. And I started to earn smiles and validation for my love for cooking. And it's been with me ever since. Today, we love to throw dinner parties where food teases a conversation, or travel where you can tease an adventurous palate. One day I'll talk to you about China, eating this delicious green dish and asking someone what kind of vegetable it is, and they pointed across the path, and it was weeds growing. Food means the world to me, but it can because I can afford to eat. I can afford to have it play that role, and I'm one of the lucky ones. I just did some work with RBC on My Money Matters, and one of the studies pointed that 40 to 50% of Canadians are living paycheck to paycheck. And many are having to make the most difficult decisions. Do I put fuel in my tank to get to work or food on the table? Food banks are being overrun, and there's lots of finger pointing going on. People are even chasing Galen Weston for the price of bananas. And I know the farm-to-table supply chain's complicated. It's labor-intensive, capital-intensive, weather, and world conflict-related. I want to introduce someone that's helping many Canadians with their food insecurity. And I'm taping the show live at the Convenience Industry Council of Canada's National Summit. My guest is Jean-Franc Archambault, but for all who know, admire, and love him, he goes by JF. And I have to tell you, today's show will bring you to tears and bring you to your feet with many standing ovations. It's a story about dreaming and doing and feeding millions of meals to Canadians in need, but also inspiring a young generation to have food autonomy, to create more and more healthy with less. And for some who are in danger of dropping out, to encourage these youth to pursue a career in hospitality. And it's also a love story between JF and his mom, who battles cancer but teaches him important lessons along the way. So let's now go to the conference floor and welcome the one and only JF Archambault to the stage.
This is Chatter That Matters with Tony Chapman, presented by RBC.
In the epicenter of Bleu Blanc Rouge, what the hell are you doing in a Maple Leaf sweater? We'll get to that, but I'm like...
I had to hide it on my way in.
I know you're busy, but you do know you're in Montreal. So, Jeff, we're going to go... We have so much to unpack, and my show's about journeys, and we're going to really get to the material work that the Table de Chef, the Brigade, Solidarity Kitchens are doing in this country. But I think it's important always that when we understand these people that are putting a dent in the universe, they see life as more than a dress rehearsal, that we go back and say, where did it all begin? And I want to go back to I think it's coming home from school where your kids are probably saying, you're trying to grab a snack and go out and play sports. You hung around the kitchen.
My mom was a great cook. I can't say she wasn't. She was the best. And I would come back from school and head straight to the kitchen to know what we were having for dinner. She was at home and she was helping my dad. My dad has a home practice. He was a lawyer, and she was helping him and preparing for us to return from school. So we were privileged. We were a privileged family. I grew up in Laval, in Champfleury. I actually was born in Montreal in Hansik. And when I was 1 year old, we moved to Laval. It was fields at that time. There was 3 houses in Champfleury. Now there's more than 4,000 houses, and it's changed.
And the kitchen, like when she invited you in, when did you start being fascinated, not just with, hey, can I lick the bowl, but the actual recipe and the creation?
I was always curious, and I wanted to help her. Actually, she was alone. We were all there, and she was always taking care of us and wanting to make something, create something. And so she would start me on salads because that's you can't really go wrong on that side. And then she would talk to me about making things. She was great at desserts. I was never, and I still, I'm a cook. I'm not a pastry chef. My wife handles that part because she's an accountant and a lawyer. So she counts everything. And so she measures everything. She goes back to it and makes sure she did the right things and the step by step. Even yesterday, she did an apple crust. It was unbelievable. We went running for a 5K with Delphine, one of my daughter. And when we came back, we said it was untouched. She was sleeping because she'd put the twins to bed. And Delphine and I are coming back from our 5K run, and we're like, hey, hot apple crust, The kitchen for me has always been this place where we gather. It's the heart of a house. It's the heart of a home. So for me, I wanted that's where you live.
And it's fair to say you've got a big home. John Wright earlier was talking about 1.9 kids per average family. You have about 17, don't you?
I go 5 kids.
5 kids. Good for you. Your dad, you mentioned it as his practice, but he was also involved with culinary.
My dad was the legal advisor to the chefs community of Quebec. So he was the lawyer of the Chefs Association of Quebec. So he would represent more than 600 chefs and cooks and help them manage their business, on any part of their business, even family. Because when you're a chef and you work so many hours, it breaks families, and so managing that, divorce, and everything, he would look after that, and he had a gastronomical club. He would attend and go there. He had things he would wear, special things he would wear for those dinners. I always find it was funny. It was a bit. It was a bit of circus, but it was. I managed to go there a couple of times, and we always were surrounded by food and never missed food.
When he invited you to these events, was there? When I've talked to people that have left the Navy SEALs or professional sports, they talk about the camaraderie, the community they miss the most. Did you feel that with chefs, even though they might work for different restaurants and stuff? It was a community.
When I was going to events with my dad, and I would meet chefs. I met Normand Laprise for the first time. I was 10 years old, and the restaurant was called the Citrus, and it was with Monsieur Beausoleil. You would see the passion that they have, dedication, devotion, and to their work and passion mostly, and their generosity. I always was amazed by that passion and that generosity of giving themselves whole. They're all in. And so for me, when I was thinking about bringing an army, with me on the fight to food waste and hunger and food security, I thought that would be a great crowd to mobilize.
Just because
for me, it was, okay, these guys, they prep food. Here's food waste, and it's generated not only by them, but by the cycle and the industry and the way the wheel turns. And for me, it was like, okay, these guys, they're either looking at it and not seeing it anymore, and just accepted it, not accepted it, but it's part of everyday life.
When you first saw that, though, this sense of food waste, it was really when you went to school, though, right? Now, I'm curious. You took hospitality.
Yeah, it wasn't planned like that.
No. Did your dad kind of say, "Hey, you should be a lawyer. You could take over my practice"?
No.
Or
well, I could have been a lawyer. I mean, I have pretty good arguments when I argue, and I
don't think your wife said you've never won one.
I wasn't a really good reader, so when he told me I had to read the civil code, I was like, oh. I stopped at Article 1471, which is about the Good Samaritan Act. Yeah. I remember that one because that's what we're driving upon to recover food and in a safety zone. So. But for me, there's something that happened when we're a family of 5. So I have an older sister and a younger brother. And we would always go to Maine on vacation. So my dad was closed his office from St. John Baptist holiday to for a month and a half. And we would go with a camping tent and we would leave for Wells and go there every summer. One summer in particular, when I was 14, we would go there, and we were around the fire, and my mom and dad said they had something to tell us, and my mom shared with us that she was diagnosed with cancer.
Did you ever think, because I mean, you and I had very similar parallels, Laval, we lost our mothers quite young, but at the time, how do you internalize it at age 14?
You don't. You just don't accept it. You just take it like a football hit. It's like middle of the field. You didn't see it coming. Side, boom.
Were you amazed that she tried to take away your pain, even though she's the one that's dealing with the disease?
It didn't. And at some point, she fought for 10 years, all the way to 2000. She was given 2 years in the first place, and she changed her whole. We were eating very well, but she introduced organic. She introduced many things that really helped her, like food helped her to go through not 2 years, but 10 years, and quality life for, I would say, 8 of the 10. With the treatments period, a month in, a couple of months through there, that was pretty hard. She would come home and she would sleep all day for almost a week after the treatments. Towards the end, it was really hard because I would have wanted to go on the ring to fight that fight for her, and I would have. And at some point, she couldn't understand why I was so upset, and why I had this anger in me when she was the one that was gonna die. One night, she would come and say to my dad, "What does he not understand that I'm the one who's gonna die?" I went berserk. I left the house and I went to the Laurentians. I went up a mountain. It was at night. Went on the ski lift and I sat down on a look at the stars and just like it was too much.
The parallel track, which I think is important because they both come together, is 4 years before she dies, you're going to hospitality school. You're starting to see all the waste that's happening there. I mean, you're making, as a class, you're making meals for 100 people. 12 of you eat, you might bring some leftovers, but so much is getting thrown in. That starts to bother you, doesn't it?
When I was 18, I was doing a technical degree. It's 3 years in business at Bois-de-Boulogne College. My dad is the head of the department, and I'm not going to class. I was going through a dark period, and I wrote a letter to 2 of my best friends. I had black thoughts, like I wasn't ready to go through with leaving this place, but I was giving myself a last chance, and it was really a last chance. And I was writing to my friends that this was my last chance and that I needed them. They shared this letter with my dad without me knowing. Imagine, good friends.
I think they were good friends.
And my dad got me down in his office. He was okay. Like, I thought he was going to be really mad, but he understood, and we had a great conversation. And we went to the backyard and we burned the letter together. It was pretty symbolic.
Think he had his own letter, given the fact that he's losing the love of his life, that he probably understood you as...
Oh, I have 5 kids, and we struggle sometimes, so, as parents, but I could not imagine him going through what he was going, and on top having me not going well. It was heavy on him to go through with that thought. Like, after that, it sparked to me that I had to look in front, and what my mom would have wanted is me to succeed and to be happy. So we both knew we were going to lose her, but it kind of triggered something else. And then my dad said, instead of not going to class anymore, just go and see someone that will help you to find your way. And I went to see someone, and I ran a test, and I scored really, really high on hospitality. And that's how I couldn't go to ITHQ first because I wasn't going to my class. So my resume was not very good. I could not make it on grades. So I had to prove that I changed my course, and I really wanted to do that. So I went for a year and a half in Laurentians in Saint-Adèle at the hospitality school in Saint-Adèle. And we had a country house. So imagine the trust. Almost on the line of leaving this place and having those black thoughts. Our parents need to be confident at some point, but close their eyes and just pray that everything's going to be okay. My parents let me go and spend a year alone in the country house and go to that school, without knowing if I was going to be okay. But I think they knew it was going to be the right path this time. And it was. So for me, it was like being with people that understood me better. And it was so easier to talk and make friends and just be myself. And so after that, I went back to say, okay, I worked in restaurants. I was a sideline working as a dishwasher at Saint-Hubert Rotisserie. And then I went to work in a restaurant in Les Menus Plaisir in Sainte-Rose.
Yeah.
And I went to DTHQ for 3 years in hotel management. I convinced them in an interview because my grades were still not.
Resume still wasn't there.
But when they got me in an interview, and I pitched them why, and I knew now what I wanted to do. So I was pretty convincing. That's where I realized in the last year, I was doing cooking classes. So you go around in hotel management, you go 3 years and you do housekeeping. So I handle making the bed very well at home and cleaning the washrooms and stuff and doing the mirrors. Mirrors is my one of my specialties. Superpower, yeah. And but through cooking, I realized that we were about 20, 25 students and we were prepping around 80 to 100 portions of everything. And we would eat. I managed eating 2 plates, 3 plates, no worries. But at some point, there's too much food. The chef would say, okay, let's wrap up. And wrapping up didn't mean to put into those containers like we would at home. It meant putting everything we had prepped for 3 hours in the garbage. And that for me was eye-opening. And the chef said, it's for food security reasons. You're doing food handling classes too. You understand food safety. We don't want to poison anybody. And people are not trained in the social sector to handle that type of food. And it's too risky. So we don't want to cause any reputation damage to the school if something would happen to someone that would get food poisoning or
bureaucracy.
Yeah, exactly.
You graduate and you become very early on. I think your first business is Fairmont.
Chateau Vaudreuil. For 2 years.
And you become quite a star. They realize that you're one of the superpowers you have besides cleaning mirrors is the fact you're a great connector. You're great with people. So that's happening. And then the Marriott recruits you and you're about to go to Quebec City, your first real apartment. You're so excited about it. But let's bring your mom and hers together because I think it's all material that you were discussing with your mom near the end of her life, this horror of food waste, but at the same time, your career is taking off. And a lot of people whose career is taking off, you kind of lose all the things that are wrong to focus on your career. So bring that all together full circle.
So in 2000, I'm working at the Chateau Vaudreuil. There's so much food that's wasted in all the banquets and the weddings and stuff. And I've shared with the GM my caring for taking some of that food to shelters and people that need it. But without him wanting or budging on this, same thing, it's reputational. I accept a job at the Fairmont Tremblant. The day that I accept the job and I wanted to go to Tremblant, I wanted to work on a ski resort. My mom goes into the hospital for bone marrow transplant. It was the last chance. And the oncologist brings our family together and he shares that, through the 10 years, she managed to extend. The body got damaged and there's not enough good to go through the battle. It was the end of the road. She died in May of 2000. She died home. It was nice. I had her last breath in my arm. We were all together. It was a beautiful and calm moment. And then I started working in Tremblant and I was pretty good. Like a year after, I became sales manager of the month, beated the Chateau Montebello star that won it for like 12 months in a row. But again, food waste. I get friends with the executive chef and I see in the kitchens, my clients, when I sell a conference like this, I see the food being wasted outside. And I'm like, I'm going crazy with that. I talk to the chef about it and we talk with the GM. So it brings that back. And then I think my mom came back down and kicked me in the butt and say, what are you going to do about this? I'm not here anymore. I can't do anything about it. You can. You're still here.
Did she know about your dream prior to that? Was that something where you talked to her about when you came home?
Not a lot.
Not a lot but she's inside you. And I get, did you value time differently after she left? Because as I know that I went from thinking immortality and time was infinite to day by day. Day by day, yeah.
I plan, but I try to enjoy every day to the fullest.
Hi, it's Tony Chapman. We come back on Chatter That Matters. JF takes us inside the kitchens of hotels and conference centers and sports venues, and we look at how much food is wasted that could be repurposed as delicious meals. But he doesn't just think about it. He goes after one of the biggest games in town, the Montreal Canadiens and the Bell Center. And as you'll soon learn, it's only the beginning. It's Tony Chapman from Chatter That Matters. I ask Canadians about their money matters. We talk debt, inflation, interest rates, and many were worried and some felt they could lose everything. In response, RBC has created My Money Matters. It's a site where you gain financial knowledge, you learn how to manage debt, reduce stress. There's even tools and apps to help you deal with the realities of today. Visit rbc.com/money matters. Your financial well-being matters to you and to RBC.
You're listening to Chatter That Matters with Tony Chapman, presented by RBC.
I'm chatting with Jean-Francois Archambault. Many of us dream of doing more with our life. Well, here's someone that does so much more. And we're recording this chat live at the Convenience Industry Council of Canada's National Summit.
So you're at the Fairmont in Tremblant, and part-time you decide that you're going to personally make this dream. And I'd love you to take it through, and if I've got the timelines right, you go in to see the president of the Montreal Canadiens to validate the idea.
My dad played a big role too, because when I wanted to gather the Chefs Association and try to talk to them about the food recovery program I had in mind and validate it with them, I called Moisson Montréal, the Montreal Food Bank, and say, hey guys, you're doing bulk food and pallet food and non-perishable food, but you're not doing prepared food. And you can't bring prepared food to your warehouse and then dispatch it. You need to distribute it right away to the smaller shelters that serve homeless and people in need. So it needs to be a small connection. And yes, I am a connector, and that's my number one skill. For me, it was a matter of creating this short circuit between hotels and shelters, and with no intervention from the food bank, but the food bank knowing and sharing with them what we were doing on the food security side. That's how it started. And so my dad opened the door to bring the president of the Chefs Association. I got Moisson Montréal to come, and that's how we created. In June 2002, we created La Tablée.
The Table des Chefs.
The Table des Chefs. And then from 2002 to 2005, working for Fairmont, coming back down as a regional sales director of sales for Eastern Canada for Fairmont, coming down to Montreal, getting an apartment in Laval, and then saying, we need to move this project, but voluntarily. In 2005, my first mentor was Gisèle Desrochers. She was the executive vice president of HR at the National Bank of Canada, an amazing woman. And so Grand Tablé was our first charity dinners. And with the first one we did was at Moisson Montréal. We took the warehouse, we put tables, we got Normand Laprise, we got chefs, we had the vice premier of Quebec. Everybody was there just to give the example. And we got trucks all the way to the tables just to show after that all the food that was from our banquet. We had to show, we walked the talk, and we would have everybody put the food in the trucks, and the trucks would leave from the warehouse, from the venue, like to take the rest of the food to people that need it. So the first table I sold was to Tony Meri, who was the VP of Business Development at the National Bank of Canada. And I went back to him the following year to get him as a chair for my fundraiser. He said, I can't do it. I'm involved with other causes, but I have Gisèle from our executive team that loves what you're doing and would love to do it. And she's the one who opened the door to meeting with Pierre Boivin. She knew that this was coming. And there was another, Lorraine Fortier, who was at Alcan at the time. She was in charge of the executive suite of Alcan at the Bell Center. And she said, Jeff, it's so crazy the amount of food that's wasted in the Bell Center, after the Montreal Canadiens game. We take it from our suite and we bring it to the streets, to shelters ourselves, and knowing that, she said to me, I'm going to create this charity board for you for the Grand Tablé. And so she got me like Carole Italien from Bombardier. She got me a group of people.
And how old are you at this time?
I'm 27 years old.
So if you're not part of the Montreal community, these are some of the most powerful
it was the
people.
Big cheese. Yeah.
This is the
I
the
still
grand fromage.
to date still didn't bring a group of such influential people together on my charity board. I have key people there, mind you, and I think that the reason why was that we needed to raise 150,000, and bringing all those people, one of them could have done them by themselves. And so like 6 of them together is like 150,000. That's nothing. Gisèle will do it. So, we could have raised $1 million with them. But on a single morning, Gisèle calls me and she says, Pierre wants to meet you next Tuesday.
Pierre's the president of the Montreal Canadiens.
At that time. He's now the CEO of Claridge. So he gets me in his office at 7 a.m. Oh my God, I'm in the president's office. It's like a dream come true, And he soon remember the reason why I'm here, you know? So he said, Jeff, there's too much food that's wasted here. If your program is what I've heard it is, we'll test it here. And so imagine, I had not recovered a single piece of food before because it was so hard, knocking at doors of chefs saying, yeah, sure. But then putting you back at the bottom of the pile, it wasn't a priority. Food recovery was not a priority. Food waste was not a priority. The hotel industry, our industry, was reactive, not proactive on food waste. And Pierre was there allowing me to do it in the biggest venue in the city.
You're a kid, you walk out of the office of the president of the Montreal Canadiens. He doesn't just like your idea. He gives you the puck and says,
gives me the keys.
Go for it.
Yeah.
Now, most people that have a big dream like that might run to the dressing room. You went after it.
For me, it was a chance to prove that it works. If I'm able to do it there, I can do it anywhere. Sat down with Gilles, shared with him my thoughts and vision. And then I was doing my MBA at the University of Quebec in Montreal, and I took a ops class, and I convinced colleagues there was a special project. It was the first social project, not business-oriented project, to be approved. And the teacher said, yeah, sure, do it. Integrating a food recovery process in such a building in such a detailed oriented
So you
business.
use your fellow students as free labor to develop the business plan.
Yeah.
So there's a bit of shamelessness in you as well.
So no, but I mean, everybody needs to be involved in their community. Imagine the hard part is sitting in the back, not watching the game and hearing the goals, but not seeing the game. That's the hard part. But seeing all that food and bringing Pierre in the walk-in fridge the first time with all the racks, all the pans, and opening the pans and seeing the food. And I remember Pierre looking at me and was like, this is it, JF. When you look at 5-star, 4-star hotels, hotel like this, anybody would eat leftover food from 5-star chefs, no? When you look at that and you know that there's so many food and there's so much food, and you multiply the number of hotels that there is in these cities where poverty is and where food insecurity is spiking, it doesn't make sense that we all take care of that.
So how did you get the chefs on board? Because they'd always say, I love this, but it was always something they felt important, but not urgent. They always pushed it back. How big, we won't even talk France, just in Canada, how big La Table de Chef has grown and how many meals you served from what was initially, I'm mad as hell that I'm seeing this teacher of mine throwing out this food.
So the Bell Center first year was 100,000 meals to the Welcome Hall mission. Today, we're in over 200 establishments across Canada. Mainly in Quebec, we recover over 2 million meals annually. And about 300,000 outside Quebec and growing. Like we'll hit 1 million within the next 3 years in Canada, outside Quebec. Coming from the hotel business, working for Fairmont, very processed organization. Marriott, when you're running franchises, you have a playbook. Food recovery needs to be part of your playbook to make it work. If it's not there, your employees are not going to do it because there's so many other things to do. But when you look at the Bell Center now, it's part of their job. It's not even a thought. It's part of what they do now. So if there's no displacement, they're not working a half hour more.
Do you ever take people from the Bell Center to the mission so they realize
they do?
And that must be such an amazing thing.
We just did, and I'll come to the story with the jersey, Tony. But imagine 13 years after, and I joke with Jeff Molson on this. I'm working with Hellman's, okay, and Hellman's is looking for a social entrepreneur in Canada to work on a food waste campaign. And they don't know who to choose. They're going through. I'm an Ashoka Fellow. So it's a social movement of social entrepreneurs across the world. And there's about 40 fellows in Canada, Dr. Julien, there's many other Canadian fellows. And, Barb in Toronto at the head office gets a call from Hellman's and she says, hey, you need to work with JF. I'm on a call with Hellman's, all their marketing people, Ogilvy, their agency, and Edelman. Mm-hmm. And I'm called La Table des Chefs, okay? And so my chances are, in my mind, pretty low. I pitch the project and I start talking about the Bell Center and what we're doing and start talking about what we did with Sidley. When Martin Gauthier, the CEO of Sidley, calls me one day and he says, I want to serve at my Christmas party only recovered food bites from chefs to show everybody that food needs to be valorized. It needs to be, and we did it. It was pretty amazing. We didn't pay a dime. Food didn't cost anything. And he donated the money he would have spent on food to us instead. When I pitched that to Hellman's, I said, if I'm going to work with you, we need to go into the Scotiabank Arena and sign up the Leafs. It's been 13 years I've been doing it with the Montreal Canadiens. We would have fed 1 million people in Toronto if we would have started at the same time. They go through, they said, we have those connections, we'll work on it. And we went through a campaign. We did an activation at the BMO field. We took excess food from 6 Sobeys stores, and we fed a whole section of the stadium with free food. But food was made from excess food just to show that 47% of food is wasted in Canada while there's so much food insecurity. And that's where I met Chris Zielinski, the executive chef of the Leafs at MLSE. And we sat down together. They brought us together. We then worked with Second Harvest as a recovering agency, such a leadership organization in Toronto and Canada now everywhere. And so we worked together. But imagine the first game when we're implementing the program, I'm there at the Scotiabank Arena. Everything is going well and we're so happy. Everybody's happy. And Chris is bringing me to the team. And then you have the marketing team there and they're coming with a bag. We have a gift for you. Take out of the bag and is this jersey. And I'm like, oh, thank you, And I'm like, I'm keeping the jersey in the bag. And I'm like, no, Jeff. You're wearing it tonight. So I'm putting on the jersey and I'm taking pictures with Chris. They're making so much fun out of me, and so I'm there and I get into an elevator and they're playing the Penguins. And there's 2 Penguin fans in the elevator. The guy is looking at me and he's like, there's no way you're a Leafs fan. I'm an undercover Habs fan. So that's it for the jersey. It's just, and to tell you that once we got in and Chris shared that Robert Bartley, the executive chef of the Canucks in Vancouver, used to be his boss in Toronto and work with him prior to him becoming the executive chef. I said, Robert, I've been trying to get there and it's been so hard. So we took a picture together. We sent it to Robert and say, you're next. And it worked.
Yeah.
And so after that, we signed the Rogers Arena in Vancouver and we signed the BC Place. And now we're with the Flames in Calgary back in February.
You're listening to Chatter That Matters with Tony Chapman, presented by RBC.
Joining me now is Jean-Francois Archambault. He's a social justice warrior, and he's serving up so much good and for the good of the world. And we're recording this chat live at the Convenience Industry Council of Canada's National Summit.
I want to also share with the audience the pandemic hits.
Yeah.
There's no arenas. And you create the Solidarity Kitchens.
So I was scared food was not going to be available. So imagine you're getting 2 million meals in the community one day, and then everything stops. So where those 2 million meals are going to come if they're needed, when they're needed, that through the pandemic, food insecurity is going to go up. And then I was seeing there were talks about the army and we weren't sure what was going to happen. We need to get meals done, prepared, frozen, ready for distribution. So if Army is taking over some places, they have access to ready to serve meals and they can distribute it to the community. So in my mind, I was like, okay, we need to go into some of the biggest kitchens and we need to go at it for a month and prep as many meals as we can. I am good friends with the executive chef of the Queen Elizabeth, Chateau Frontenac, and the Bell Center. Now Yves Lowe is there as the executive chef. They're all not operating. I'm like, guys, are you open to making your kitchen accessible for social projects? Of course, Jeff. There's nothing we're doing right now. And so I was looking at the wage subsidy, and the way it was set up was that if you applied for it, you could get 75% to pay your staff if you were keeping your staff. There's 25% missing if you had lost more than 30% of your business. And they all qualify. All the hotels qualify. To me, it was like, hey, guys, keep your staff and they'll work for La Tablée. Let's set up a program where I'll pay the 25% missing. So you're able to collect the 75. I'm donating through the program $1 a meal. We organized $1 a meal program where for every meal prepped, I would give them $1, and then the rest I would provide for them. So all the containers, all the food that was donated, we got more than 600 tons of food donated to us that was normally going through the hospitality sector.
Mhm.
A lot of potatoes, a lot of eggs, all the morning stuff like breakfast in hotels are really big. So potatoes, eggs, onions, and then we got like chicken. We started committing some of the biggest hotels. So we called Ivanhoe Cambridge that owns the Queen Elizabeth and the Chateau and said, what are you doing for the pandemic? And said, just make sure your kitchen is accessible through that program. And they gave the green light to both hotels. And I knew these kitchens were the largest in their cities. So, and I knew through talking with the chefs that they had the capacity to prep 25,000 meals a week each. So 50,000 meals a week. Eve at the Bell Center could do about the same.
How many meals did you serve going from 0 to sounds like 1,000 miles an hour?
The highest we were doing 150,000 meals a week. We had up to 60 restaurants or kitchen operating for us. 60 kitchens. And we caught the attention of Minister Bibeau at Agriculture. She was there then. And we got into the emergency meal program with the Breakfast Club of Canada and all the other guys in Food Banks Canada. We got in for funding and she wanted me to scale the program across Canada. So we took our kitchens at MLSC. So I called Chris. I say, Chris, what can you do? You want to take over 200,000 meals? I'm sending you the stuff. So we batch cooked, like we said, okay, let's do shepherd pie. Let's do 200,000 portions of shepherd's pie. Let's do frittata. Let's do 200,000. So then when we gathered those donations, we called to get the supply chain going. And then we connected with GFS at first. And
Gordon
then
Food Service,
Sobase.
Yeah.
Sobase came in as a distributor to help us pro bono. So we're sending all our donation there to get the meals.
Has anybody ever said no to you?
Yes, but I keep staying in their faces. So,
So I want to
I always come back.
Yeah.
When I know that there's something that doesn't make sense and that the person can help me, I'll find a way. If it's not me saying it to him, there'll be someone else that knows it better than me.
We're talking millions of meals and we're talking 150,000 a week and some big numbers. But in a couple of minutes, describe something where I think is truly game changing, which is the brigade.
Everything we've talked about is needed now, but we need to prepare the next generations. I joined the executive board of Moisson Montréal when I was 25 years old. I was reading through all the documents and everything. And there was a study that was shared by Public Health of Montreal. And the head of the Public Health Agency of Montreal was on the executive board with me. And it was the loss of culinary skills and knowledge from generation to generation, and in particular in high poverty areas. I knew the chefs were behind and were going to be behind the food recovery program and with us, but I knew on top they were most passionate about sharing what they had the passion for is food. So I knew that I was going to be connecting them in schools, that we could get that going in high poverty index high schools and use the old OMEC class that wasn't used anymore because they took out OMEC in Quebec and everywhere in the country except in BC. I took back those spaces and we started in 4 of the poorest high schools in Montreal, in Saint-Henri, Hochelaga Maisonneuve, and in Saint-Michel, where street gangs are pretty active, at Louis-Joseph Papineau. They call it the bunker. And we got in with chefs and we ran workshops. It was called Les Ateliers du Frère Toc at first. And then it worked. And the head of the Montreal School Board gave me a challenge that if I was going to work in her 4 baddest and meanest high school, she was going to support me. And so I won the challenge. She then got me to scale to 10 schools. And then we went to the South Shore of Montreal and we scaled this program We got fundings, and then we got IGA and Sobase to be behind us as their major partner. And we now are in 250 high schools in Quebec. And we're in 50 some high schools across Canada and 6 other Canadian provinces.
As we wrap this up, and I know this might be a tough question for you, but you know your mom's with you. What would you say to her and what would she say to you?
We wouldn't say anything. I think we would just enjoy the moment and hug each other and just cook together. What I would like to have in that room is all my children and my wife, because she's never met her.
I always end my shows with my 3 takeaways. And I use this word at the highest level where it's thrown around so often in society. I use it with someone like a Terry Fox, and I use it with you. You are a hero. And you're a hero with humility, with grace. You've put a real dent in the universe. And I think it's so important that we share stories like yours to people, especially today when we're feeling such impossibility, that there's always possibility. One of the greatest examples, the pandemic hits, the kitchens close, and you find a way to open those kitchens. The second thing is your dream came from, a lot of people's dream, I want to be rich, I want to be wealthy, I want to fly in private jets. Your pain was food going into the garbage, and you couldn't step in and take that disease from your mom. And both of those manifested in saying, I'm going to do something about it. We should listen to people when they have dreams sometimes, or when they're in their darkest parts of their life, that there is an opportunity to burn that letter and to move forward. And I think the last thing is that the reason why you're so magnetic is you have a higher purpose. You never stop looking at this desired outcome, which is, I'm going to take the in out of food insecurity. I'm going to take the un out of today's economic uncertainty. And I think that's something that we should celebrate. And I am so happy you burnt that letter versus your life, and you're with us today. And I can only imagine what you're going to do for Canada and for the world for decades to come. So thank you so much for being part of this.
Tony, I understand, and I hated the word hero, because for me, I have a team of 45 now working on this with us, and there's so many people on the front line, and they should be supported. I always encourage people to look in their own community first, and you'll find those real heroes, the frontline workers on food security. I mean, they're supporting local shelters. They're elderly people retiring and going to help to prep meals for the local school or prep snacks. We need to foster that, and we need to celebrate that on the local basis. I'm coming to encourage them to not stop, because our social net, safety net, is so thin. I'm scared that if we don't celebrate these people and we don't give them a break, our country is going to suffer. I think we have to be careful and not take for granted the social safety net and all the people that support it.
So let's have a round of applause for those frontline workers and for JF.
I can't believe how many Canadians are living paycheck to paycheck or without a paycheck, relying on social assistance and food banks or the generosity of friends and family, and a growing number without a roof over their heads. I can't imagine the stress that comes with having to choose between the essentials in life. Do I heat my home, food for my table, clothes? Can I find a better life or a safer place for my children to live? And that's why I'm such a fan of people like JF Archambault, La Table de Chef, Laurie Nickel from Second Harvest, and all the others out there who do so much to hold together a social net, who make a difference and counter this rising demand, who donate their time, their money, and their food. And in JF's case, leaving a promising career to turn his dream into reality. I also want to thank RBC for doing their part to help. They've just created My Money Matters. RBC knows firsthand what it means when their clients live with daily uncertainty, insecurity, and fear, all of which can manifest into stress, anxiety, and worse, mental and physical health issues. And we're seeing with people of all ages, especially young males, they're dropping out altogether as their situation feels like wet cements pouring daily onto their path in life. So what is My Money Matters? I guess it's a hub where people can find articles and resources to help. There's no magic wand, but I think you can take away some of that insecurity and uncertainty by firming up where you stand. They've got ideas to help you with your debt and take away stress. A section on how to turn aspirations into goals, how to plan for life events, and even a money academy to build your financial literacy. And the other thing they encourage you to do is to reach out to your financial advisor, wherever you bank, because they're free and they can help. And when you come to My Money Matters, there's no cost, there's no need to surrender data or to be an RBC client. They're just one of many doing their part in a world upside down where people need a hand up versus a handout.
Chatter That Matters has been a presentation of RBC.
It's Tony Chapman. Thanks for listening, and let's chat soon.